The horse came out of the dark like a thunderclap with teeth. Two grown men hit the dirt before anyone screamed. The third went under the hooves and didn't get up the same. By the time the lanterns reached the paddock, Tempest was lathered black, eyes white-rimmed, breath roaring out of him like a furnace, and the stable master was on his knees in the straw saying the word cursed over and over. They said no one would ride that animal again. They said the next person who tried would die in front of witnesses. They didn't know about the girl walking up the road with everything she owned in a flour sack. Stay with me till the end of this story. Hit that like button and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. The hired coach didn't take her all the way. The driver pulled up at the iron gate, jerked his thumb toward the long gravel drive, and said he wasn't paid to go further than this. Briar Holloway climbed down with the flour sack against her hip and her one good pair of boots already gray with road dust, and she stood for a long minute looking at Ashford Manor through the rain. It was bigger than the church back home. That was the first thing she thought. The second thing she thought was that nothing built that big stayed warm inside. The drive went on for what felt like a quarter-mile. By the time she reached the kitchen door, her hair had come out of its pins and her skirt was heavy with water, and she could feel a blister starting where the left boot had split at the seam. A woman in a white apron answered the door, looked her up and down, and didn't smile. "You the new girl from the agency?" "Yes, ma'am. Briar Holloway." "Mrs. Pike, housekeeper, you're late." "The coach." "I don't want the reasons. I want you to understand we keep time here." Mrs. Pike opened the door wider, and Briar stepped into a flagstone kitchen that smelled like onions and bread and wet wool. "You're not house staff. You're stable. You'll eat in here with the rest of us, but you sleep over the tack room. Don't come into the front of the house unless you're sent for. Don't speak to the Duke unless he speaks first. Don't speak to Lady Margaret at all if you can help it. And whatever you've heard about the Black Horse, you keep your distance. We've already buried one boy this year, and I won't be writing letters home for another." Briar nodded. She had heard. The girl at the employment office in town had whispered about it while she stamped the papers. "Ashford Manor, miss. You sure? They go through stable hands like firewood up there, on account of that horse." "Yes, ma'am," Briar said. "There's bread on the board and tea in the pot. Eat fast. The head groom wants you in the yard before dark." She ate standing up. The bread was good. She hadn't had butter in 3 weeks. She tried not to look like a person who hadn't had butter in 3 weeks. The head groom was a man named Halloran, gray at the temples, missing the top half of his right ear from something he never explained. He met her at the entrance to the stable block and walked her through it without slowing down, pointing at stalls as he went. "Bay mare, Lady Margaret's. Don't touch her without asking. 2 carriage horses, geldings, good tempers. You'll feed them first morning and last evening. Pony for the steward's daughter, bites if you turn your back. Hunter, gray. The Duke rides him most days. Don't put him in the 3rd stall. He kicks the wall at night, and the Duke hears it from his window." She nodded along. She'd worked stables since she was 11. The names changed, but the work was the same. Then they came to the end of the row, and Halloran stopped. The last stall sat by itself. There was an empty stall on either side of it, and the door was reinforced with extra timber, and a piece of canvas had been nailed up across the opening so you couldn't see into it from the aisle. Even before they got close, Briar could hear the breathing. Slow, heavy, the way a bellows sounds. "That's Tempest," Halloran said. "You don't go near him. You don't feed him. You don't muck him. There's a man comes in from the village 3 times a week, name's Crane. He handles the stall when the horse is turned out in the small paddock. You don't even look at him hard. You hear me?" "Yes, sir." "I mean it, girl. He put a man in a chair for life back in spring. Boy of 19, broke his hip in 4 places. Won't walk again. Before that it was Tom Wexley. Gored him through the thigh with a back hoof clean as a pike. Tom bled to death in the snow before we got him inside. There's been others. The Duke won't sell him and won't shoot him, and I've stopped asking why." Briar looked at the canvas. There was a faint shifting on the other side of it. The breathing changed for a second, caught, then settled again. "Yes, sir," she said again. "Good." Halloran started to turn away, then stopped. "And don't believe what the others tell you. He's not cursed. He's just mean. There's a difference, but it doesn't matter much when you're under the hooves." He left her there. She stood for a moment in the aisle with the canvas curtain twitching, and then she went to find her bed above the tack room. The first night she didn't sleep much. Not because of the horse, because the room over the tack room had a window that wouldn't latch, and the rain came in along the sill and pooled on the floorboards. And because the mattress smelled like the previous occupant had been sick in it and not been able to wash it out. And because she was 24 years old and alone in a place where nobody had said her name kindly yet. She lay on her back and counted what she had. 1 spare shirt, 1 spare set of stockings, the brush her mother had given her, 3 coins sewn into the hem of her underskirt for emergencies, the letter from the agency, the boots, which were going to need resoling before winter. That was all of it. That was everything. She turned on her side and listened to the building. Down through the floor, she could hear the horses moving in their stalls. The soft thuds of hooves on packed earth, the creak of a wood bucket swinging on its peg, the low rolling sigh of a big animal settling its weight. And once, way down at the end, she heard the heavier breathing again, the bellows sound. Tempest, in the dark, awake. She thought about that for a long time. An animal that mean didn't sleep at night. He stood up in there and listened. She didn't know yet what she was going to do about it, but she was already thinking. What? She saw the Duke for the first time on the 3rd morning. She was hauling a water bucket across the yard when he came out of the side door of the manor with a riding crop in his hand and a long dark coat that didn't have a wrinkle in it. He walked the way certain men walk when they have been in charge of everything since they were children. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at the kitchen girl who curtsied as he passed, or at Halloran who touched the brim of his cap, or at the gray hunter being let out from the stable block. He looked at the horse and at the gravel between him and the horse, and that was all. Briar set the bucket down so she could see him properly. He was younger than she'd expected. Maybe 30, 32, dark hair, cut close, a face that looked like someone had carved it out of something and then forgot to do the part where you put the warmth in. He swung up onto the gray hunter the way a man gets into a chair he sits in every day. Halloran tugged the reins free and stepped back. The Duke turned the horse in a tight half circle and rode out of the yard at a clipped trot, and never once in the whole transaction did he look at any human face. "That's him?" Briar said. Halloran was checking a strap on his glove. "That's him, Duke Rowan Blackmere. His father died 7 years ago, his mother the year after, his older brother in a hunting accident before either of them. Whole estate fell on his shoulders before he was 25. He runs it like a man running a regiment. Don't take it personal." "I won't," she said. "He notices when work isn't done. He doesn't notice when it is. That's how he is." "Yes, sir." She watched him ride down the long avenue of beeches until the gray horse was just a small moving thing against the wet green of the fields. She picked up the bucket and went back to work. She wasn't going to take it personal. She had not come to Ashford Manor to be looked at by a duke. She had come because the wages were decent and the housing was included, and her mother was buried 3 counties away in a pauper's patch. And she had nothing left in the village she came from but a sister who'd married badly and didn't write back. She had come to work. She had come to be somewhere. That was enough for now. It was the 4th night that she walked down the aisle and sat outside Tempest's stall for the first time. She didn't plan to. She'd gone down to check on the bay mare, who had a hot spot on her left foreleg that Halloran had asked her to watch. And on the way back up the aisle, she'd heard the bellows breathing again, and something in her had just stopped walking. She stood there in the dim spill of one hung lantern at the far end of the row. The other horses were asleep. The wind was working at the slate on the roof somewhere above her, and the breathing on the other side of that canvas curtain was so heavy, so deliberate, that she could feel it in her own chest. She sat down. She didn't know why. She sat down on the packed earth aisle with her back against the timber post opposite his stall, and she pulled her knees up and she said very quietly, "Hey." The breathing didn't change. "I'm not going to come in," she said. I'm not stupid. I just wanted to say hello. They told me not to talk to you. I'm doing it anyway because I don't think you've had anybody talk to you in a long time." There was a shifting, a hoof scraped once. Then the breathing settled again, the same slow bellows. "My name's Briar. I don't know what they called you before you were Tempest, but I bet it wasn't that. People don't name a foal Tempest. They name him something soft and then he grows up and they change it when he scares them." She sat there for maybe 10 minutes. She didn't talk the whole time. She just sat and let the air be the air and let him hear her breathing the same way she heard his. And after a while the bellows slowed. It didn't go quiet. But it slowed, and there was a long moment where she could hear the horse shift his weight to the other hip, the way a tired animal does when he's no longer braced for a fight. She got up carefully and went to bed. She didn't tell anyone. She came back the next night, and the night after. On the seventh night, she brought an apple. She didn't open the canvas curtain. She didn't even sit close to the door. She sat in her usual place against the timber post, and she ate half the apple herself, and then she set the other half on the ground about 6 feet out from the stall door, and she went and sat back down. She didn't say anything for a long time. "That's there if you want it," she said finally. "I'm not going to put my hand in. I'm just going to sit." It was a stupid thing to do. She knew it was a stupid thing to do. If he wanted the apple, he'd have to come to the door, and the door was bolted, but he could put his head over the top of it if she was close enough, and he was the kind of animal who'd take a piece of a person's face off without slowing down to chew it. But she sat, and after maybe a quarter of an hour, she heard him move. Slow, slow. The shift of a big body in straw, the huff of breath through nostrils, and then the soft scrape of a hoof set down deliberately, and another, and the canvas curtain moved. She didn't look up. She kept her eyes on her own boots. She heard him at the door. She heard the breath. She heard him lower his head over the top of the door. There was a creak as he leaned weight against it. And then there was a long pause. And then she heard him huff once, sharp, the way a horse blows out at something he doesn't trust. She didn't move. He huffed again. And then she heard the soft pull of teeth on the wood floor and the crunch of the apple half being lifted. And a moment after that, the slow rhythmic chewing of a big animal eating a fruit it had decided not to be suspicious of. She let the breath out of her own chest very slowly. "Good," she said. "That's good." It went on like that for almost 3 weeks. She never told a soul. Some nights she just sat. Some nights she talked, low and steady, about whatever was in her head, the way the bay mare's leg was healing up, the way the rain came in her window, a story her mother used to tell about a man who married a fox and lived to regret it. Some nights she brought a piece of something, a bit of carrot, a quarter apple, once a heel of bread soaked in honey water, and set it down and walked away and let him come to the door for it. By the second week, he was putting his head over the door before she even sat down. By the end of the third week, she was standing up against the door with her hand flat on the wood and his big black muzzle on the other side of it, breathing into her palm through the gap above the latch. She could feel the wet of him, the heat, the tremble that ran under his skin every time a sound came from the yard. He wasn't a calm animal yet. He was a frightened animal pretending to be a calm one for a few minutes a night because someone had been quiet near him long enough that he'd let his shoulders down half an inch. She knew the difference. She'd seen dogs do it. She'd seen people do it. "You're not cursed," she told him one night, with her hand against his nose through the gap. "You're not even mean. You're just tired. Somebody hurt you, and then a bunch of somebodies tried to fix it by hurting you more, and now you don't know which hand is which. I know, baby. I know." Tempest blew out hard through his nostrils. Then he leaned his weight into the door and pressed his forehead against the wood, and she felt it through her palm, the whole great heavy skull of him, resting. She didn't cry. She wanted to. She didn't. She stood there until her legs ached, and then she went up to her bed over the tack room, and she lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought, "I am going to lose this job," because she was going to keep doing it. She knew she was. And one of these nights, Halloran was going to come down the aisle for a forgotten lantern or a sick horse, and he was going to see her, and she was going to be fired before sunrise. She was right about the part where someone was going to see her. She was wrong about who. It was the morning after a hard rain. The yard was a mess of puddles, and the gravel had washed in long fans across the lower part of the drive. Halloran had gone to town to meet the farrier, and Mrs. Pike had sent the kitchen boy with him for flour. Briar was alone in the stable block, except for Crane, the village man, who was supposed to come at 9 to turn Tempest out into the small paddock so the stall could be mucked. Crane didn't come at 9. He didn't come at 10. By 10:30, Briar had finished her other work, and she was sitting on a hay bale at the end of the aisle, trying to decide what to do, because there were 3 other horses who needed turning out, and the bay mare's leg needed cold hosing, and someone was going to have to deal with Tempest sooner or later, or he was going to be standing in his own filth by afternoon. She stood up. She walked down the aisle. She told herself she was just going to open the canvas curtain and look at him. That was all. She'd look at him in daylight for the first time, and then she'd come back and wait for Crane. She pulled the curtain back. He was bigger than she had let herself imagine. 16 hands, maybe 17. Coal black except for a small white patch on the offside of his neck, like someone had spilled paint there once a long time ago. He was standing at the back of the stall with his head low and his eyes on her, and the breathing was the same heavy bellows she had been listening to for 3 weeks. "Hi," she said. His ears flicked. "I'm going to come in," she said. "Don't do anything stupid." She lifted the latch. She knew it was a stupid thing to do. Halfway through doing it, she knew, and she kept doing it anyway, because Crane wasn't coming, and the horse was standing in his own water, and someone had to be the first person who walked into that stall without a whip in their hand or fear in their throat. She had fear in her throat. She just kept her shoulders down so he couldn't see it. She stepped in. She left the door open behind her, halfway, so he had somewhere to go if he wanted to bolt. She kept her hands low and her eyes off his eyes, and she said his name in the same flat, quiet voice she'd been using for 3 weeks of nights. And she walked toward his off shoulder, not his head, never the head first, and she put her palm against his neck. He flinched. The whole great body of him went tight under her hand like a drumhead, and his head came up and his nostrils flared wide, and for one long second she thought he was going to come over the top of her and kill her in his own stall in broad daylight. She didn't move her hand. "Easy," she said. "Easy. Easy, baby. I'm here. I'm right here. It's just me. It's just the girl. It's just the girl." He held himself like that for what felt like a year. Then the breath went out of him in a long shudder, and his head came down again, and he leaned his cheek against her shoulder the way a tired child does. And the whole 16-hand weight of him sagged half an inch toward her, and she had to brace her knees to keep from going down under him. She was still standing there with her hand on his neck and her face pressed against his jaw when the boot heels came down the aisle behind her. "What in God's name?" She didn't turn around. She felt the horse go tight again under her hand, and she said very softly, "Easy, easy," and she stroked the side of his neck twice, and only when she felt him let his weight back down did she look at the stall door. Duke Rowan Blackmere was standing in the open half of it. He was in his riding clothes. He had the crop in his hand. His face, that carved-out face that didn't have any warmth in it, had gone the color of old paper. "Step out of that stall," he said. His voice was very low and very even. "Step out of that stall right now." "I'm coming," she said. Just give me a second to get my hand off him. He doesn't like a fast move." "Now, girl." Tempest's ears went back. "Your Grace," Briar said, and she didn't take her hand off the horse. "With respect, if you raise your voice again, he's going to put me through the wall." The Duke was silent. She slid her palm down the long line of Tempest's neck, slow as syrup, and she stepped back. And she kept her body between the horse and the open door the whole way out. She slipped through the gap. She pulled the door closed. She slid the bolt with hands that had only just started to shake. Then she turned around and looked at him. He was taller than her by a good 6 inches. He was looking at her like she was something he had never seen before and couldn't quite place. A tool, maybe, that had turned up in the wrong drawer. The crop was still in his hand. His knuckles on it were white. "Explain yourself." "Crane didn't come," she said. "I was going to wait, but the stall needed—" "You were inside that stall." "Yes, Your Grace." "With your hand on him." "Yes, Your Grace." "That animal has killed a man." "I know, Your Grace." "He put my undergroom in a chair for the rest of his life." "I know." "Then explain yourself." She looked at him. She was 24 years old and 3 weeks at Ashford Manor, and she had 3 coins in her hem and a sister who didn't write back, and nowhere on the wide green earth to go if he turned her out today. She knew exactly how that arithmetic worked. She knew it down to the dirt. She said, "Nobody ever just sat with him." The Duke's face didn't change. "I sat outside his stall after work," she said, "for 3 weeks. I didn't touch him. I just sat there at night and talked. Sometimes I brought a piece of apple. I let him come to the door of his own accord. He hasn't been bitten or beaten in this stall by me, Your Grace. He's been listened to. There is a difference. I know it doesn't sound like a difference if you've never had to be quiet around something frightened, but it is one. And if you fire me for it, I understand, but I won't lie about what I did. I went in because Crane wasn't here and the horse was standing in his own water, and somebody had to be the first person to walk in there without expecting to die. The Duke looked at her a long time. Then he looked past her, at Tempest, who had his head over the door now, watching them. The bellows breathing was still there, but slower, much slower. The Duke didn't say anything for a while. 3 weeks, he said finally. Yes, Your Grace. At night? Yes. After your work was done? Yes. He stood there in his coat with the rain dripping off the collar of it, and Briar realized she had no idea what he was thinking. She had assumed she would. She had assumed a man with a face like that had only one thing inside of him, and it was cold. But he was looking at the horse, and his mouth had gone a little soft at one corner, and she thought, oh, you. He had been afraid of the horse too. She filed that away. She didn't know yet what she would do with it. She just filed it. Halloran is in town, the Duke said. Yes, Your Grace. When he returns, you will not mention this to him. Yes, Your Grace. And you will continue what you have been doing. Your Grace? You will continue what you have been doing, he said again, and his voice was as flat as a board. And you will report to me in the library at 8 tomorrow evening with whatever it is you would call a plan. I do not know what you think you are doing with that animal. I do not know if I believe a word of it, but I have not seen him stand still under a human hand in 2 years, and I will not pretend I didn't see it because I dislike the shape of the answer. He turned, took 2 steps down the aisle, and stopped. He didn't look back at her. What is your name? He said. Briar Holloway. Holloway. Yes. 8 o'clock, Holloway. Don't be late. I keep time. He walked out of the stable block, and his boots rang on the cobbles outside, and Briar stood in the aisle for a long minute with her hand against her own throat, trying to slow her breathing down to something she recognized. Behind her, Tempest huffed once, soft, and bumped his nose against the door. Yeah, she said. She didn't turn around. Yeah, I know. Me too. None. She didn't sleep that night either. She lay over the tack room with the rain coming in along the sill, and she stared at the rafters and thought about everything that had happened. And she thought mostly about the way the Duke had said, I will not pretend I didn't see it because I dislike the shape of the answer. That was not a thing a cold man said. That was a thing a man said who had been making himself cold on purpose for a long time and was tired. She thought about her mother, who had died of a wet cough in a room not much bigger than this one. Her mother had said, near the end, Briar, you have always been the one who sees what people don't want seen. Be careful with it. Some people will love you for it, and some people will never forgive you for it, and you will not always be able to tell which is which until it is too late. Briar turned on her side and watched the rain bead on the window glass. She didn't know yet which kind of man the Duke was. She suspected he didn't know either, but she was going to be in the library at 8 tomorrow with a plan. She didn't have one yet. She had until sundown to figure one out. Down through the floor, in the dark of the stable block, she could hear Tempest breathing. The bellows had gone soft. He was, for the first time in maybe 2 years, sleeping. She closed her eyes. She slept too. The library at Ashford Manor was not a room built for comfort. That was the first thing Briar noticed when the housemaid let her in at 8 o'clock sharp. It was built for authority. The shelves went all the way to the ceiling with a rolling ladder on a brass rail, and every book on every shelf had its spine squared to the edge like soldiers at attention. There was a desk the size of a small boat in the center of the room, and behind it sat the Duke with a single lamp burning, and the rest of the room was in shadow. He didn't look up when she came in. He was writing something. She stood in front of the desk and waited. He kept writing for another full minute. She didn't fidget. She had learned a long time ago that the surest way to show a person they had power over you was to fill their silence. Sit down, he said, still without looking up. There was one chair on her side of the desk. She sat. He finished what he was writing. He set the pen down with a precise little click on the rest. He folded his hands on the desk and looked at her. You said you had a plan. I said I would try to have one, Your Grace. Something moved in his face, not quite irritation. Do you or don't you? I do, she said. It's not complicated. Some people might call it too simple to be a plan. Tell me. I keep doing what I've been doing, Every night after work, I sit with him. I let him set the pace. I don't put a halter on him until he stops flinching from my hand. I don't put a saddle on him until he stops flinching from the halter. I don't ask him to move under a rider until he trusts the weight of one without moving. 6 weeks, maybe 8. Could be less, probably not more. Rowan was quiet for a moment. 8 weeks, maybe 6. The last trainer I brought in said 6 months. The last trainer you brought in was probably trying to break him, Breyer said. Begging your pardon. That's not what I'm doing. Breaking takes longer because the animal is fighting you the whole way. What I'm doing is more like, she paused, looking for the right word, convincing. And convincing either works fast or it doesn't work at all. He studied her. She had the feeling he was doing it the way he studied a contract, looking for the clause that would come around and cost him later. What do you know about horses? He said. I've worked stables since I was 11. Before that, I was around them anyway. My father kept 2 draft horses, and my mother wouldn't let him sell them even when the money was bad, which it always was. I know what a frightened animal looks like, and I know what a mean animal looks like, and I know there's a difference. And most people don't bother to learn what it is because it's easier to just say the animal is mean. Tempest killed a man, Rowan said. His voice was flat. Tom Wexley. He was 22 years old. I know. He didn't just kick him. He went for him. There was intent to it. That is not a frightened animal. Your Grace, I'm not saying he's not dangerous. I'm saying he's dangerous because someone made him that way. Those aren't the same thing. A dog that bites every hand because every hand it ever knew hit it, that's not a dog that wants to bite. That's a dog that knows it's going to get hit, and it's decided to get there first. She stopped herself. She had been watching his face, and his face had gone closed again, the way a door shuts. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to tell you your business. No, he said. Go on. She blinked. Go on? You stopped. Go on. She took a breath. What happened to him before you got him? Do you know? Rowan was quiet. He looked at his folded hands, and then out the window at the black wet night, and then back at her. I bought him at 4 years old from an estate sale in the north, he said. The family was dissolving. Patriarch died. Eldest son had debts. Tempest was their prize horse, bred for racing, trained hard. The eldest son had, he paused, unconventional methods. That's what they said. The estate manager told me the horse was difficult but had exceptional bloodlines, and I believed I could manage him. I was 26 and confident in my own management. What did unconventional methods mean? I didn't ask in enough detail. Right. She was quiet for a second. So someone hurt him, and then you got him, and he didn't know the difference yet between the men who hurt him and you. He put a groom through a fence wall on the 3rd day. Did anybody sit with him? Not the way you describe, no. Did you? Rowan looked at her steadily. I am the Duke of Ashford, he said. I don't sit on the floor of stables at midnight talking to horses. No, she said. I didn't think so. She wasn't sure why she said it. It came out level, not sharp. She wasn't trying to cut him, but it landed somewhere between them in the lamplight and sat there, and the Duke's jaw moved slightly, like he was chewing over the shape of it. Is there anything you need? He said. For the horse. Nothing expensive, extra hay. He's underweight for his size, I can see it in the hip. Something to give him with his grain in the evenings, linseed oil or the like, to get the coat back. He's dull in the coat, which usually means pain somewhere in the body. There's a vet in the village. Not yet, she said. A stranger in the stall will put us back 2 weeks. Let me get his trust first. Then we can call the vet. Rowan uncapped his inkwell. He dipped the pen. He wrote something on a small card and pushed it to the edge of the desk without handing it to her directly. Give that to Mrs. Pike. She'll authorize what you need from the accounts. Breyer leaned forward and picked up the card. She looked at the number on it. It was more than 3 months of her wages. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. If this doesn't work, I will sell the horse and close that stall, and I won't think about it further. He said it without cruelty, just like a fact. You may go. She stood. She put the card in her pocket. She was almost at the door when he spoke again. Holloway. She turned. How did you know? He said. That first night. How did you know he wouldn't come over the door at you? She thought about it. I didn't, she said. I just figured he probably wouldn't. There's a difference. She left him there in the lamplight with his pen in his hand, and she didn't look back to see what his face did with that. Halloran found out on the 5th day. Not from Briar. From the linseed oil, which arrived from town on the supply cart and which Halloran himself unpacked and which had no business being in a stable that had been explicitly told by the Duke to let the black horse be. He came to find her while she was brushing down the gray hunter, and he stood in the stall doorway with the tin of linseed oil in his hand and his face the color of a boiled beet. You want to tell me what this is for? Briar kept brushing. Tempest. I told you. The Duke authorized it. She stopped brushing, turned to face him. There's a card from Mrs. Pike in my room if you want to see it. The Duke knows. He's asked me to continue. Halloran stared at her. He asked you to. Yes, sir. You went and talked to the Duke. He came to the stable and found me in the stall. It went from there. Halloran set the tin down on the stall rail very carefully, which told her he was controlling himself. You were inside the stall. Yes, sir. Jesus, girl. I'm still in one piece. You're still... He rubbed his face with both hands. How? I've been sitting with him at night for about 3 weeks before the Duke found me. I've been building trust. Halloran looked at the tin of linseed oil. He looked at Briar. He looked at the tin again. You've been sitting with the horse that killed Tom Wexley, at night, alone. Yes, sir. Without telling me. If I told you, you'd have stopped me. He couldn't argue with that. He picked up the tin. He put it down again. He rubbed the back of his neck where a man rubs when he is trying to find something to do with a feeling he doesn't have a name for. You need anything? He said finally. You come to me. You don't go around me to the Duke again. That's my stable. Yes, sir? And you don't go in that stall without telling me first. I want to know, even if I can't stop you. Yes, sir? He took the tin of linseed oil with him when he left. He brought it back an hour later and left it outside Tempest's stall door without saying anything. The weather changed. October came in cold and wet, and the estate pulled inward on itself, the way big old houses do when the season turns, everyone finding their corners and settling. Briar worked her days and spent her evenings with the horse and learned to sleep through the window gap. Progress was slow, and then it wasn't. That was how it always went with frightened things. You spent a long time seeing nothing, and then one morning you turned around and the thing you'd been waiting for had been there for a while without announcing itself. The morning it happened was a Thursday. She'd had the halter in her hands for 4 days, not trying to put it on, just letting Tempest smell it, mouth it, knock it out of her hands twice, and have to pick it up from the straw. On Thursday, she walked in with it, and he stood still. That was all. He just stood still and let her put it over his nose and behind his ears, and he flicked his ears twice, and then he stood there with his head dropped, the big skull hanging loose at the end of his neck, and she let him stand that way for 5 minutes and then took it off. She came out of the stall and Halloran was at the end of the aisle. He'd been watching from a distance. He had a look on his face she'd never seen on him before. How long? He said. 4 days of just showing it to him, about 3 weeks before that building up to this. He ever let anyone halter him before? Probably not since he was a yearling, before whatever happened to him in the north. Halloran nodded very slowly. Crane came by this morning. I told him we didn't need him anymore. She looked at him. You're handling the stall from here, he said, if you want it. I want it. Thought you might. He walked off up the aisle. Then he stopped and he said without turning around, You're a strange girl, Holloway. I know that, she said. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. She hadn't heard him make that sound before. She told the Duke her progress at their second meeting, which he had requested for the following Thursday evening, and the Thursday after that. It had become a thing. She came to the library at 8. She sat in the chair. She told him what had happened that week. He asked questions that were spare and precise, and suggested he'd been thinking about the answers before she arrived. He was different in the library at night than he was in the yard in the daylight. Not warm, exactly, but less armored. He sat back in his chair with his coat off sometimes and his sleeves turned back, and he listened to her in a way that most people didn't listen. He didn't look around the room while she talked. He looked at her, and when she paused, he waited to make sure she was done before he said anything. He's putting weight back on, she told him at the 4th meeting. I can see it in the hip already. The coat's coming in better. I'll have the vet in next week if it keeps. And the behavior? He hasn't kicked at me. He hasn't lunged. Last Tuesday, I had my face pressed against his neck for about 10 minutes while he had a nap. I know it sounds unlikely. It happened. I'm not doubting you. He was quiet for a moment. The wall, he said. Your Grace? There is a stone wall on the north side of the east field, chest height on a tall horse, wider than it looks. My father built it as a training obstacle. Every decent rider in 3 counties has tried it. Some have cleared it. Most haven't. He paused. I haven't. Briar waited. If you get him to the point where he can be ridden, Rowan said, I want to see him clear that wall. She looked at him. That's a tall ask for a horse that's been untouched for 2 years. I know what it is. Why that wall specifically? He was quiet long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, because there is a difference between a horse that has been managed and a horse that has been healed. And I would like to know which one I am looking at. Briar sat with that for a second. You built in a test. Yes. You were going to tell me this eventually. I'm telling you now. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at him. That's fair, she said. That's actually fair. All right? All right? All right. We'll work toward it. I'm not going to rush him. And if he's not ready when you want him to be ready, then I'm going to tell you that, and you're going to have to hear it. But we'll work toward it. He nodded. He picked up his pen. Is there anything else? Actually, yes, she said. I need you to come to the stable. He looked up. Not tonight, she said quickly. Not yet, but eventually. He needs to know you. You're the one he's going to be carrying when this is done, presumably. He can smell who's been in and out of this stable his whole time here. He knows your boots. He needs to know they're not going to hurt him. I gave you a card for linseed oil, Rowan said. I didn't agree to sit on stable floors. I'm not asking you to sit on the floor, she said, and she tried very hard not to sound like she was enjoying this because she was not enjoying it. She was trying to do her job. I'm asking you to stand in the aisle outside his door, that's all. Just stand there and let him smell you without anything bad happening. Nothing bad is happening now, and he's already smelled me. From a distance, there's a difference. He looked at her the same way she'd looked at the ceiling a moment ago, like he was trying to find a reason to say no and coming up slightly short. Friday evening, he said. After dinner, I'll come down to the stable. Thank you, Your Grace. Don't thank me. This is deeply undignified. She didn't smile. She very carefully did not smile. That will be all, he said, and went back to his writing, and she stood up and walked to the door, and she was fully through it and 6 steps down the hallway before she let herself smile, just once, quick, at the dark wall in front of her. He came on Friday. He came in his usual coat with his usual posture and stood in the aisle outside Tempest's stall with his hands at his sides, and Briar stood a few feet back and let the horse read what was happening. It took a while. Tempest blew hard twice through his nose, the loud snorting blast he did when he was uncertain. His ears went back and then forward and then back again. The Duke didn't move. He just stood there in the lamplight and let himself be smelled. Talk to him, Briar said quietly. Rowan looked at her. Doesn't matter what you say, she said. The voice matters. He knows your boots already. He should know your voice. Rowan turned back to the stall. A long pause. I don't know what to say to a horse. Say anything. Tell him about your day. Another pause. And then, in a voice about half a register lower and about twice as flat as his usual speaking voice, the Duke said, The steward brought me 3 problems this afternoon. The grain stores have a rat problem. The north roof leaked in the last rain. One of the tenants is disputing his lease renewal. He paused. That last one will go to arbitration, and I will win it, and it will still take 6 months, and I will dislike every minute of it. Tempest's ears had come forward. Keep going, Briar said softly. Rowan kept going. He talked about the steward and the roof and the tenant for another 2 or 3 minutes in that same low, flat voice, and Tempest listened to every word with his ears trained forward like 2 small radar dishes trying to get a bearing on something. And then, slowly, the big black head came over the door. Rowan went still. Don't step toward him, Briar said. Let him come to you. Tempest stretched his nose out. He sniffed the Duke's shoulder. He blew out once, wet and warm, against the side of Rowan's neck, and Rowan held himself completely rigid in the way a man holds himself when he is not used to being touched unexpectedly and is trying very hard not to flinch. "There," Briar said. "Don't do anything. Just breathe." Rowan breathed. Tempest sniffed along the line of his jaw. Then the horse lifted his head and looked at Briar like he was checking with her, and she nodded once, absurd as it was to nod at a horse, and Tempest blew out one more time and pulled his head back over the door and went back to his hay. The Duke stood there for a moment. "He smells like hay and old rain," Rowan said. "He smells like a horse that hasn't had a bath since spring," she said. "We'll fix that this week." Rowan looked at his shoulder where the wet nose had been. "My coat," he said, in a very particular tone. "I'll tell Mrs. Pike to use the good soap." He turned to look at her, and she saw it. A flicker, fast as a match catching, there and gone in a second. Something that wasn't quite a smile, but was in the neighborhood of one. "Holloway," he said. "Yes, Your Grace." "You are a very strange employee." "So I've been told," she said. He nodded once, the way he nodded when a meeting was done, and he walked up the aisle and out of the stable block. And Briar turned to Tempest, who had come back to the door and was watching the Duke leave with his ears up and his expression, as much as a horse has one, considerably less hostile than it had ever been before. "What do you think?" she said. Tempest bumped his nose against her shoulder. "Yeah," she said. "Me too." Ma. 3 weeks after that, she put a saddle on him for the first time. She'd worked up to it in stages. The saddlecloth first, then the pad, then the saddle set on his back without cinching, then cinched once, loose. Each thing separately. Each thing for as many days as it needed. He didn't fight the cloth. He fought the pad a little, went stiff and round-backed, and she let him move off and stood and waited, and when he stopped, she went back and tried again. By the third time, he stood for it. The saddle was harder. He'd been saddled badly. She could see it in the way he braced when she brought the girth up. Not just flinching from the cinch, but bracing all the way up through his spine like he was waiting for something to happen after the girth, something worse. She took 20 minutes just getting the saddle on and cinched the first day, and most of those 20 minutes was her standing still while he worked through whatever the memory was. She didn't push, she cinched it and walked away and let him stand in it. Halloran was watching from the aisle. He'd taken to watching, the way you watch something you're not sure you believe in yet. He didn't interfere. He'd stopped interfering weeks ago. "How long before you get on him?" he said. "I'll get on him when he's ready." "I know. How long do you think?" She looked at the horse. 2 more weeks, maybe." Halloran nodded. He rubbed the back of his neck again, his thinking gesture. "The Duke's watching from the east window sometimes," he said. "When you're working in the yard." Briar didn't turn around. "Is he?" "In the mornings when you work him on the lunge. Just thought you should know." "Thank you," she said. She didn't look at the manor house when she went back to Tempest. She was careful about that. She had work to do, and she was going to do it. And whatever Rowan Blackmere did at his east window in the mornings was not her business. The work was her business. The horse was her business. But her ears told on her later, when she was walking back up to the manor at lunchtime, and she heard a sash window pull shut above and behind her. She didn't look up. She kept walking. But she felt it. The particular feeling of someone choosing not to be seen, which is different from someone who was never looking. She had been looked at. She filed that away, too. 2 weeks became 10 days. On a cold morning with frost on the paddock rails and her breath showing white, she got on him. She'd had his saddle on every day for the 10 days. She'd leaned her weight across his back from the mounting block 4 times, each time a little longer, and he'd done well. Gone tight the first time, accepted it the second, the third, the fourth. Halloran stood at the fence each time with his arms crossed and his expression the look of a man watching someone do something that violates his every professional instinct and being unable to articulate why it still seems to be working. On the 10th day, she put her foot in the iron and swung up. She sat very still. She kept her hands low, her legs loose. She was just wait. She was not asking him anything yet. She was just sitting up there in the pale October sun being wait. He stood. He blew out once, hard, and his whole skin shivered the way a horse's coat does when a fly lands. But he stood. "Good boy," she said, very soft. "Good boy. I'm just here, that's all. I'm just here." She sat for 10 minutes without asking him to move. When she got off, she ran her hands down his neck and his shoulder and told him he was smart, and she meant it. Halloran uncrossed his arms. "Tomorrow we walk," she said. "You're out of your mind," Halloran said. "I mean that sincerely and as a compliment." She went inside to tell the Duke. She didn't have to wait for Thursday. He came to find her that same evening, which had never happened before. She was in the tack room cleaning bridles when she heard the knock at the open door and looked up to find him there in his coat with his hands in his pockets. "Halloran told me," he said. "I was going to tell you Thursday." "I know." He leaned against the doorframe. He looked, for once in his life, almost casual. How did he feel? "Solid," she said. "Like there was something real under me. He's carrying himself differently already. He knows he's being asked to do something honest, and I don't know how to explain it. You know when you ask a person for something real instead of something polished and they sort of expand a little, like they're relieved?" "No," he said. Then after a pause, "I think I understand what you mean." She put the bridle down. "When did you last ride him?" "I never have." "He wouldn't be approached." Before the groom stopped trying, Rowan was quiet for a moment. "A year and a half ago. There was an attempt. It didn't go well. Were you there?" "I organized it. I wasn't—" He stopped. "I told myself it was a matter for professionals." Briar picked up the next bridle. She rubbed the leather between her fingers where it was starting to crack. "He's going to need to know you on his back before the wall," she said. "I can get him to the wall. I know I can. But the test you want? That's you, riding him, not me." "I know. If you haven't been on him before, I know, Holloway." She looked up at him. He was looking at the window, at the black square of it where the dark outside was pressing against the glass. He had that look again, the one she'd first seen in the stable after she'd come out of the stall, the look of a man whose face was built for hiding but who'd run out of space to hide in at the moment. "He's different from what he was," she said. "I know you can see that. And you're different in his stall from what you probably were a year and a half ago." "Am I?" he said. "You didn't move when he put his nose in your face." "I was trying not to flinch." "That's what not moving is," she said. "That's the whole thing. That's all it ever is." He looked at her then, not like she was something in the wrong drawer, more like she was a sentence he'd been trying to parse for a while and was finally getting somewhere with. "Thursday," he said. "Yes, Your Grace." "Good night, Holloway." He pushed off the door frame and walked back across the yard, and Briar sat in the tack room with the bridle in her hands and the lamplight on the leather and the sound of tempest breathing through the wall behind her, slow and even and not frightened, and she thought that even if this whole thing came apart tomorrow, even if the Duke changed his mind, even if the wall defeated them, even if everything went sideways in the way that things in her life had a habit of going sideways, even if all of that happened, she had already done the one thing she'd set out to do. She had made the horse trust a quiet hand. Whatever came after that was its own story. Whatever came after that arrived faster than she expected, and it wasn't what she'd planned for. The carriage came up the drive on a Tuesday, 3 days before the Thursday she and the Duke had agreed on, and it was the kind of carriage that announced itself, lacquered black with gold trim on the doors and 2 matched bays pulling it, and a footman up top who jumped down before the wheels had fully stopped. Briar was in the yard when it pulled in. She stepped back against the stable wall with a bucket in her hand and watched. The woman who came out was beautiful, the way a painting in a cold hallway is beautiful. You noticed it, but it didn't warm you. She was maybe 27, 28, in a green traveling coat that had been cut by someone expensive, and she looked at Ashford Manor the way a person looks at something they already consider theirs, not with longing, but with assessment. Mrs. Pike came out of the kitchen door fast enough that Briar suspected she'd been watching for the carriage. "Lady Celeste," Mrs. Pike said, "we weren't expecting you until Thursday." "I changed my mind about the route," the woman said. Her voice was the kind of voice trained at an early age to carry without seeming to raise. She looked around the yard. She looked at Briar. She looked away from Briar, the way you look away from a post or a bucket or any other object in the yard that has no particular bearing on your afternoon. I'll have your room prepared immediately, Mrs. Pike said. See to it. Lady Celeste picked up the front of her skirt and walked into the manor without touching the step with anything less than perfect certainty, and the footman followed with the cases, and the door shut behind them. Briar stood in the yard with the bucket. Then she went back to work. She found out who Lady Celeste was that evening at dinner in the kitchen. She didn't have to ask. The kitchen staff had opinions they'd been storing up and a new audience for them. Lady Celeste Whitmore, the cook said, slicing bread with the focused energy of a woman making a point. Her father's Lord Whitmore of Fenham, has the biggest coal holdings in the north. The family's been pushing this match for 3 years. She set the knife down. His Grace has been pushing back for 3 years, which is why she's still Lady Whitmore and not Lady Blackmere. He doesn't want to marry her, Briar said. He doesn't want to marry anyone, is what Halloran says. The steward thinks he'll have to eventually because the succession needs, the cook lowered her voice without much conviction, an heir. But the Duke is the Duke, and when the Duke doesn't want to do something, the thing doesn't get done. Until it does. She's very, Briar searched for a word, assured. She has a lot to be assured about, the cook said. The Whitmore money would clear every debt this estate has been carrying since the Duke's father's time. The advisors want the match. The solicitors want the match. Half the county wants the match. She paused. The Duke's grandmother wanted it badly, and she died before it happened, which is the only thing that slowed it down. Once you lose the grandmother, you lose the main force of the pressure. But the pressure's still there, Briar said. The pressure, the cook said, never stops. Briar ate her dinner and went to bed early and told herself that none of this was her business, and almost believed it. She encountered Lady Celeste properly the next morning at the stable entrance. It was not an accident on Lady Celeste's side. Briar had Tempest on the lunge line in the yard. They'd graduated to the open yard 2 days ago, which was its own small triumph since open spaces still unsettled him, and the first 2 sessions had been messy. And she was working him in circles, keeping the line easy, not demanding much, just asking him to move and breathe and be in the world without bracing. He was doing well enough. His ears were forward more than back. She heard the boot heels on the cobbles and felt the shift in him before she looked up. Tempest's head came up and his step shortened, the way it did when something new entered his radius. "Whoa," she said, soft, and he stopped and stood, breathing hard. Lady Celeste was at the yard gate with one of the housemaids beside her. She had a riding crop in her hand that she wasn't going to use on anything today, just something to carry. She looked at Tempest the way she'd looked at the manor house, assessing. "That's Tempest," she said, not asking. "Yes, my lady." "I heard you'd been working with him." She tilted her head. "I also heard no one had gotten close to him in 2 years." "He's come along well," Briar said. Lady Celeste looked at her then, really looked at her, in a way she hadn't in the yard yesterday. The look was not unkind. It was something more deliberate than unkind. It was the look of a woman categorizing, placing, filing away. "You're the stable girl, Halloran's new hire." "Yes, my lady." "How long have you been at Ashford?" "About 2 months, my lady." 2 months. Lady Celeste looked back at Tempest. "Rowan mentioned you. In one of his letters." Briar kept her face still. "I'm sure there's a great deal to manage on the estate, my lady." "He mentioned the horse, and the girl handling him. I find it interesting that those 2 things arrived at the same time." She paused. "He usually doesn't mention the staff." Briar didn't say anything. Tempest shifted at the end of the lunge line, and she let the rope out half a foot to give him somewhere to put his attention. "He's beautiful," Lady Celeste said. "Rowan was devastated when he went bad. He bought him as a personal project. The Duke doesn't do things by half measures. When the horse couldn't be managed, it sat badly with him." She turned to go. "I'm glad you've made progress. It will put him in a better frame of mind for the conversations we need to have this week." She glanced back once. "You may carry on." She walked back across the yard, the housemaid scuttling behind her, and Briar stood in the center of the yard with the lunge rope in her hands and Tempest at the end of it, and something cold sitting in her chest that she did not have a clean name for. She put Tempest away and did the rest of the morning's work, and didn't let herself think about it. There was nothing to think about. Lady Celeste Whitmore was what Lady Celeste Whitmore was, And it had nothing to do with Briar. She kept telling herself that, and it kept working less and less. Thursday came. She had told the Duke she was ready to show him something, and she was, and she had also been dreading it because she'd watched him with Tempest enough times now to know that whatever ease existed between the Duke and the horse in the lamplight of the stable vanished completely in the open air. In the open air, Rowan Blackmere became himself again, the man with the straight back and the controlled face and the riding crop in his hand and the expectations he'd grown up on. She met him at the stable at 7 in the morning. He was already there when she arrived, in his riding coat, and he looked at the tacked-up horse without expression. "He looks different," Rowan said. "He's put on weight. Coat's come back in." She handed him the reins. He took them. "I'm going to be right next to you," she said. "I'm not going to let anything happen. But you can't—" She stopped. "Say it. You can't ride him the way you ride the gray. If he feels that back goes stiff or the hands come up hard, he'll come apart. He needs the same thing he's always needed. He needs you not to brace for impact." Rowan looked at her. "I don't brace." "You're bracing right now." His jaw moved. "That's—" He stopped, looked at the horse. "I'll keep the hands soft." "Thank you." She stood at Tempest's head while Rowan mounted. The horse went tight. She felt it through the lead rope, the whole body going like a fist closing, and she said his name, low and even, and he blew out hard and then let the tension go by increments, the way she'd taught him, like a fist opening finger by finger. Rowan sat very still up there. She'd give him credit for that. He sat still, and he kept his hands low, and he waited, and Tempest waited, and the whole yard held its breath. "Ask him to walk," she said. Rowan put the smallest pressure with his left leg, and Tempest walked. Not well. He was short and choppy, his head too high, one ear cocked back listening to the man on his back. But he walked. He went around the yard twice, and Briar walked alongside at the shoulder and talked the horse through it, and by the second circuit his head had dropped 2 inches, and his stride had lengthened into something closer to the walk she knew from their own sessions. When they stopped, the Duke sat for a moment without speaking. "He's different," he said again. Quieter this time. "Yes," she said. He dismounted carefully. He stood with the reins in his hand and Tempest next to him, and there was a second, a quick and private second, where he put his free hand against the horse's neck the way she'd seen him do once before in the stable at night. Flat-palmed, tentative, almost like he wasn't sure he was allowed. Tempest turned his head and looked at him. Rowan pulled his hand back. "The wall," he said. "How long?" "A month, maybe. Let him build confidence under you first. I'll work him with you 3 mornings a week. By December, he'll be ready." He nodded. He handed the reins back to her. He turned toward the manor. "Your Grace," she said. He stopped. "You did well just now." He didn't turn around. "I barely did anything." "That was the point," she said. A pause. Then he kept walking, and she took Tempest back to the stable, and Tempest bumped her shoulder the whole way there, which she chose to take as commentary. The dinner started that evening. Lady Celeste hosted them the way a woman hosts things in a house she expects to eventually own, with the authority of a person already certain of the outcome. She sat at the right hand of the Duke, which was where the estate protocol put her, and she talked about the Whitmore holdings, and the political situation in the county, and the winter season in the city, and she was not, Briar had to admit, unintelligent. She was very smart. She just used her smartness the way some people use a good knife, to cut cleanly and quickly and put things where she wanted them. Briar knew this because the kitchen staff reported everything. She didn't ask them to. They just did it, the way kitchen staff always do, because the kitchen is the center of any house and what flows through it flows both ways. "She's asked him twice about selling Tempest," the cook told her on the second evening. "Apparently she thinks the horse is a liability and the energy spent on him could go to better use on the estate." Briar stirred her tea. "What did he say?" "That the matter was being handled. That's all?" "That's all." Which, from him, could mean almost anything. Briar stirred her tea some more. The cook watched her with the particular expression of a woman who knows more than she's saying and is deciding whether to say it. "She asked about you too," the cook said. Briar's spoon stopped. Not by name. She asked how much the new stable arrangement was costing. The steward told her it was an internal management matter. She asked again. He told her the same thing. The cook picked up her own cup. She's thorough. She's protecting her interests, Briar said. I can't blame her for that. No, the cook agreed, but I'm not sure your interests are nothing. Briar didn't know what to say to that. She drank her tea and said goodnight and went up to the tack room and lay on the mattress, which she'd managed to replace the stuffing of 2 weeks ago, and stared at the ceiling and tried to be honest with herself. She'd been putting something in a box since about the 5th Thursday meeting, a feeling that came up when he said a particular thing in a particular way, or when she caught him at the east window in the mornings, or when he'd put his hand flat on Tempest's neck like he was asking permission. She'd been putting it in the box and sitting on the lid and telling herself it was nothing. It was just the close quarters of a shared project. It was just the fact that he listened to her when nobody had listened to her like that since her mother died. It was just proximity and gratitude and her own loneliness dressed up as something it wasn't. She was still putting it in the box. She went to sleep. It was a Saturday, 2 weeks into December, when everything shifted. The morning had been good. Better than good. It had been one of those mornings where the work comes together and you can feel it in your hands, the particular rightness of something going the way you built it. Rowan had ridden Tempest for 40 minutes in the east field, not the wall yet, just the field, and the horse had moved under him with something close to willingness, something close to trust, and when they came back in, Rowan had been breathing differently than usual, not holding his chest as tight, not carrying his shoulders at his ears. He'd looked almost like a person who had just remembered that movement could be something other than duty. She was brushing Tempest down when she heard the stable door and then the voice. "I thought I might find you in here." Lady Celeste came into the aisle in a gray dress that was too good for a stable, but which she wore into the stable anyway, because she was the kind of woman who wore what she chose regardless of setting. She looked at Tempest, who flicked his ears toward her and then away. "He's come along remarkably," she said. "Thank you, my lady. I mean it genuinely. I know I asked about selling him. I ask about everything that costs money. It's not personal to the horse." She leaned against the opposite stall, watching Briar work. "It's a skill you have, isn't it? Getting things to trust you." Briar kept brushing. "I just know how to be quiet." "That's not a small thing." Lady Celeste paused. "He talks about you, you know. Rowan. It's not inappropriate. He talks about your work. The approach you take, he finds it, I think the word he used was instructive. A tiny pause on that word, very precise. Rowan doesn't find many people instructive. "I'm sure he knows more than I do about most things," Briar said. "Yes, about most things." Lady Celeste tilted her head. "But not about this particular thing, apparently. Not about how to be quiet around something frightened." She looked at Tempest again. "I think that's what he admires. He grew up in a house where the method was always force. His father was not a gentleman. The estate runs because people are afraid of the consequences of not running it well. That was the inheritance, that and the debt." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm not telling you things you don't already know. I suspect you've worked most of this out yourself." Briar put the brush down. "Lady Whitmore," she said carefully, "I don't know what you think. I think you're smart," Lady Celeste said simply. "I think you're good at your work, and I think Rowan has noticed, and I think you're sensible enough to know where that goes and where it doesn't." She pushed off the stall rail. She wasn't being cruel. That was the thing. There was no cruelty in it, just a kind of brisk clarity, the way a good surgeon is brisk. "I'm not his enemy. I'm not yours either. But I understand this estate and what it needs in a way that takes years to learn, and I would be doing you a disservice if I let you—" She stopped, reconsidered. "I'm telling you to be careful," she said. "For your own sake. The feelings of a duke are not a reliable foundation for a stable girl's future." She walked out. Her boot heels faded down the yard. Tempest pushed his nose against Briar's arm. Briar stood very still. She was shaking a little. She hadn't expected to be shaking. She was angry. Not at Lady Celeste, exactly, because Lady Celeste had been honest and in a strange way almost kind. She was angry at the shape of it, at the fact that it was true, at the fact that someone had walked in and named the thing she'd been keeping in the box and put it in the open air between them. She pressed her forehead against Tempest's neck. "Don't say anything," she told him. He huffed. "I know," she said. She didn't go to the library that Thursday. She sent a note with the housemaid. Progress continues, writing on schedule, nothing requiring discussion, And she spent the evening in the tack room repairing bridles she'd already repaired and trying to convince herself she was being sensible. He came to the stable on Friday, not at his usual time, not in the morning to ride, but in the evening, after dinner, the way he'd come those early times when they were still figuring each other out. She was putting away the evening feed buckets when she heard him in the aisle. "You didn't come Thursday," he said. "I didn't have anything to report." "You always have something to report." She picked up the next bucket. "The riding is going well. He's building muscle in the hindquarters. Another few weeks." "Holloway." "Your Grace." "Look at me." She put the bucket down. She turned around and looked at him. He was standing in the lamp-lit aisle in his dinner clothes. He'd come straight from dinner, the formal coat still on. And he had his hands at his sides and his face was doing something she hadn't seen it do before, which was that it was not doing anything in particular. All the architecture was still there, but the guards had gone off shift. "Did Lady Whitmore speak to you?" he said. "She came to the stable on Saturday," Briar said. "We spoke briefly." "What did she say?" "She said I was smart and that I should be careful." She kept her voice level. She was not unkind about it. Rowan was quiet. He looked at the middle distance between them. "She told me she'd spoken to you." "Did she?" "She said you were a sensible girl and that she thought there was no cause for concern." He paused. "She meant it as a reassurance." "I didn't find it reassuring." Briar looked at him. "What would you have found reassuring?" "I don't know," he said. "That's the problem." She waited. He looked like a man working up to something he'd practiced 100 times and found still didn't sit right. "I need to tell you something," he said. "All right." "I am aware that what I am about to say is—" He paused, and there was a tiredness in it, a real and human tiredness, badly timed and poorly positioned, and will likely make your work here more complicated, not less. I know that. I'm saying it anyway because I find I can't not say it anymore, and I've been trying for about 6 weeks. Briar's hands were very still at her sides. "You changed the way I see this horse," he said. "You walked into my stable and sat on the floor in the dark and talked to an animal that had killed a man. And you did it because you saw something that 20 other people with better credentials and more equipment didn't see. And then you walked into my library and sat in that chair and told me what you were doing and why. And you didn't apologize for it, and you didn't dress it up, and you didn't tell me what you thought I wanted to hear." He stopped. He looked at the floor for a moment, then back at her. "I have been running this estate since I was 24 years old. I have been in rooms with solicitors and stewards and lords and men my father's age who thought I should defer to them. Nobody in that entire time has talked to me the way you do." "I probably talked to you disrespectfully," she said. She didn't know why she said that. Self-preservation, maybe. "No," he said. "You talked to me honestly. There is a difference, and I didn't know what it felt like until you." The lantern at the end of the aisle was guttering. Tempest was breathing behind her, the slow, familiar bellows that she'd been listening to for months. And it was cold enough that she could see her own breath and the Duke's breath, small pale ghosts between them. "I don't know what you're asking," she said carefully. "I'm not asking anything," he said. "Not yet. I'm telling you that the past 3 months I don't know how to say it without it sounding." He stopped again. He ran a hand over the back of his neck, which she had never seen him do before, and it undid something in her chest because it was Halloran's gesture. It was every person's gesture when they were trying to get a grip on a feeling that wouldn't stay where they put it. "You matter to me," he said. "This estate is better for your being in it. I am better for it. And I am not going to pretend that I don't know that, whatever Lady Whitmore's assessment of the situation." Briar looked at him for a long time. The box in her chest was not going to close again. She could feel that. Whatever she did now, the lid had come off it. "Your Grace," she said. "Rowan." His name, just like that. She'd never said it before. She felt him go very still. "I hear you," she said. "I do. And I'm not—" She stopped, tried again. "I'm not going to pretend either. But you have a woman in this house who has been waiting for years in a county full of people who need you to make a decision about your own estate and your future. And I have work to finish. We have work to finish." She looked at Tempest, who had put his head over the door and was regarding them both with the alert calm of a horse who had learned that human feelings in his vicinity were worth paying attention to. "Let me finish the work," she said. "Then we'll—" She stopped. Then we'll see. Rowan looked at her. He looked at the horse. He nodded once, a single small nod. The wall, he said. 2 weeks. 2 weeks? She said. He walked back up the aisle. At the stable door he stopped, and the lamp at the end threw the long shadow of him toward her across the packed earth floor, and he stood there a moment in it without turning around. Then he went inside. Briar turned to Tempest. The horse looked at her with his enormous dark eyes, the white patch on his neck catching what little light there was. Not a word, she said. Tempest blew out long and slow and pulled his head back over the door, which was about as much discretion as she was going to get from him. She picked up the bucket she'd put down. She finished her work. 2 weeks felt like a long time and no time at all. Briar worked Tempest every morning in the east field, and Rowan rode him 4 of those mornings. And she stood at the fence and watched and corrected and said things like softer on the left rein and let him find the rhythm. Don't count it out for him and you're holding your breath again. Your Grace, he can feel that through your spine. Rowan took the corrections without argument, which was its own kind of progress. He was not a man who accepted correction easily. She could see the effort it cost him, the small tightening around the jaw, the way he'd absorb what she said and sit with it for half a circuit before his body actually changed. But he changed. That was the thing. He heard her, and he changed. She didn't let herself think too much about Friday evening in the stable. She put it in the same box where everything else was, and she kept working. Lady Celeste was still in the house. She was gracious at breakfast and efficient at dinner, and she and the Duke had long conversations in the library that sometimes went past 10 o'clock, because the housemaid who put the fire out at 11 told the cook, and the cook told Briar, not unkindly, just because the kitchen told things. Briar nodded and drank her tea and said nothing. On the morning of this 14th day, the air was sharp and blue and frost-white on the stone, the kind of winter morning that makes everything look carved out of something permanent. Briar tacked Tempest up before sunrise. She was running a hand down his off foreleg, checking the tendons the way she always did before any serious work, when Halloran came in. He looked at the tack. He looked at her. Today, he said. Today. He was quiet for a moment. He picked up a dandy brush that didn't need picking up and turned it in his hands. Who's going to ride him at the wall? The Duke. Halloran put the brush down carefully. The Duke hasn't jumped a horse in... I know. The Grey Hunter. He's jumped, not Tempest. I know, Halloran. If the horse refuses at the base, he won't. You can't know that. No, she said. But I know him. And I know the Duke now, too, how he sits, and I think... She stopped. I think they're ready, both of them. They've been ready for about 5 days, and I've been putting it off because I'm scared, and I needed to stop being scared and do the work. Halloran looked at her for a long time. All right, he said. He put the dandy brush back on its hook. I'll get the others. She looked up. I didn't say anyone had to watch. No, he said, but they're going to anyway. This manor has been talking about that horse for 2 years. They'll want to see it. He paused at the door. I'll keep them back from the fence so they don't spook him. You have my word on that. She nodded. She turned back to Tempest. Hear that? She said quietly. You've got an audience. Tempest pulled at the cross ties. Stop that, she said. Stand still. By the time they rode out to the east field, the sun was fully up and the frost was lifting off the grass in a thin white haze, and there were people at the fence. Not a crowd. Ashford Manor wasn't large enough for a crowd, but enough. Mrs. Pike stood with her arms folded and her face neutral. The cook had come out in her apron and immediately looked embarrassed about it. 2 of the young stable lads were up on the fence rail itself until Halloran told them to get down with a look that moved them faster than words. And at the far end of the fence, a little apart from the staff, Lady Celeste stood in her gray wool coat with her hands in her pockets and watched. Briar brought Tempest out on a loose rein, riding him herself first the way she always did before handing him over to the Duke. She walked him twice around the perimeter of the field to let him read the space. The fence, the people, the wall in the far corner that he'd been near twice before, but never close enough to study. He went tight when they passed the wall the first time, his head up, his ears moving quickly back and forth. She let the rein out and kept her legs still and let him look at it as long as he needed to. The second pass he was looser. She brought him back to the gate, and Rowan was there. He was in his riding clothes, no crop, which she'd asked him not to bring, and which she hadn't been sure he'd honor. He looked at the wall and then at her. "How is he?" said. "Honest," she said. "He's going to tell you exactly what he's feeling. You just have to listen." "Right." She dismounted and Rowan took her place. Tempest went tight again at the change of rider, the full-body fist, and Briar put her hand on the horse's neck from the ground and said easy, 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 until she felt the tension start to release. Rowan sat still and waited, and she stepped back. Rowan walked him. Once around the field, then twice, the same circuit she'd done, same loose rein. She stood at the gate and watched. She could see the conversation happening between them through the reins and the leg, and the way the horse's ears moved in response to things too small to see from where she stood. They were not harmonious yet. They were two things learning to be one thing, but they were working at it. On the third circuit, Rowan turned toward the wall. The distance was maybe 100 yards. Tempest felt the turn and felt the wall ahead of him, and his stride shortened immediately, the old bracing, the old getting ready for something bad. Briar's hands closed at her sides. Rowan didn't push. He kept the rhythm, kept his hands low, and she could see from the shift in his shoulders that he was breathing, actually breathing, keeping his chest open, not locking up the way he had in those first mornings. She had told him once that the horse could feel a held breath through the rider's spine, and she could see him remembering that now, 50 yards. Tempest's head came up again. His stride was choppy and short and uneven, and the people at the fence had gone completely silent in that particular way that means everyone is holding their breath together. 30 yards. Briar saw Rowan do something she hadn't coached him to do. He let go of the reins, not drop them, just softened them to nothing, gave the horse his head completely, and put both hands flat against Tempest's neck the way she'd seen him do twice before in private, the tentative flat palm that meant, "I'm here. This is all I'm asking. I'm just here." 20 yards. Tempest's stride changed. It didn't smooth out. There was nothing smooth about any of it, but the choppiness turned into something with push in it. His haunches engaged under him. His head came level. He was not a perfectly moving animal. He was a horse with scars in his past and too much remembered fear. But he was moving forward, and that was the only thing that mattered. 10 yards. She felt it happen before she saw it. She felt it in her own chest, the opening up, the release. Tempest gathered himself in 3 big strides, not elegantly, not like the pictures in writing manuals, and left the ground. He cleared the wall, not by much. His back hoof clipped the top stone and sent it sideways in the grass. But he cleared it. He landed on both feet on the other side, and Rowan stayed on him, and they came around in a wide, untidy arc and pulled up at the far fence, both of them breathing hard, the horse's sides going in and out like a bellows, and the Duke sitting very still on top of him with his head down. At the fence line there was a sound. Not clapping, exactly. More like the sound a group of people make when something releases that they've been holding for a long time. Mrs. Pike uncrossed her arms. The cook put both hands over her mouth. The stable lads were back on the fence rail before Halloran could stop them, and he didn't try. Briar walked across the field. She came up to Tempest's side and put her hand on his neck, the same place she always put it, and the horse turned his head and bumped his nose against her shoulder with the full heavy weight of him. "There you go," she said. Her voice came out strange. Not like crying, just strange. "There you go, baby. That's it. That's what you had in you the whole time." Rowan was looking at the wall, at the displaced stone sitting in the grass. He said something she almost didn't hear. "What?" she said. "I said I couldn't clear it," he said. 7 years ago. My father set up a jump course the summer before he died. I was 23. I tried that wall 4 times, and the gray refused it every time." He paused. "I told myself it was the horse. It wasn't the horse." Briar looked up at him. He was still looking at the wall, not at her, and his face had the look it got when it wasn't performing anything. Just open, a little worn, like a room with the furniture moved out. "You cleared it today," she said. "Tempest cleared it." "You cleared it together," she said. "That's still clearing it." He looked at her then. Whatever he was going to say, he didn't say it, because at that moment Lady Celeste came through the gate into the field, and the moment, whatever it had been, folded itself up and put itself away. Lady Celeste walked toward them across the frost-thinned grass with her hands still in her coat pockets and her expression composed. She looked at the displaced stone. She looked at the horse. She looked at Rowan. "Congratulations," she said. And she meant it. That was the strange thing about her. She was capable of meaning it. That was remarkable to watch. "It was Holloway's work," Rowan said. He dismounted. He kept one hand on the rein. "I'm sure it was." Lady Celeste glanced at Briar, brief and measured, and then back at the Duke. "Might I have a word with you? Before lunch?" She didn't make it a question. Rowan handed Tempest's reins to Briar. His fingers touched the back of her hand as he did it, just for a second, not deliberate, just the ordinary geometry of passing a rein, but she felt it. "Of course," he said to Lady Celeste. They walked back toward the manor together. Briar stood in the middle of the field, with Tempest's reins in her hands, and watched them go. The two of them in their good coats against the white morning, and she thought about what it cost to want a thing you had no business wanting. She thought about her mother's voice. Some people will love you for it, and some people will never forgive you for it. She led Tempest back to the stable. She was cooling him down in the yard, walking him in slow circles, when Halloran fell into step beside her without being asked. "You all right?" he said. "Fine." "You look like someone punched you somewhere internal." "I'm fine, Halloran." He walked with her for one full circle without speaking. Tempest was cooling down well, his breathing settling, his head low and relaxed. "I've been at this manor for 18 years, Halloran said eventually. "I was here when the old Duke was alive. I've seen what this place was and what it's been since." He paused. "Rowan Blackmere is a better man than his father was. That's not high praise because his father was a cold and selfish one. But he's better. He's tried to be better. And I've watched him for 7 years since he took over, and I've never once seen him look at a person the way he looks at you when he thinks you're not watching." Briar kept walking. "I'm not saying that to upset you," Halloran said. "I'm saying it because I've been watching this thing develop for 3 months and not saying anything, and I'm old enough to know when saying nothing is the wrong choice." "What would you have me do with that, Halloran?" "Nothing," he said. "I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm asking you to stop pretending you don't know what it is." She stopped walking. Tempest stopped with her. "I know what it is," she said quietly. "I know exactly what it is. I also know that I have 3 coins in the hem of my skirt and nowhere to go if this goes badly, and that he has a woman in that house who's been promised this match for years, and that this county will talk about it every way but kindly if anything comes of it. I know all of that." "Yeah," Halloran said. "I know you know. I just wanted you to say it out loud so it was real, and not just a thing you were carrying alone." He patted Tempest's shoulder once. "Carry on." He walked off. She stood in the yard with the horse for a moment. "Why does everyone keep talking to me today?" she said to Tempest. Tempest flicked one ear back at her and kept walking. The word that came from the manor at 2 o'clock was delivered by the housemaid, who found Briar in the tack room and said, with the particular expression of someone delivering information they don't fully understand, that the Duke wished to see her in the library before dinner. Not Thursday. Not the usual time. Before dinner. She washed her hands and changed her shirt and told herself it was a state business. The wall had been cleared. There were decisions to make about the horse's future, the training schedule, the practical next steps. It was a state business. She believed this approximately as much as it deserved to be believed, which was not very much. The library was different in the late afternoon. The low winter sun came through the windows at a slant and made the room look almost gold. All the book spines lit up and the dust in the air visible and drifting. Rowan was standing at the window when she came in. Not at his desk, which she noticed, standing at the window with his hands behind his back, looking out at the east field. She stood in the middle of the room and waited. He turned. "Lady Whitmore is leaving tomorrow morning," he said. Briar didn't say anything. "She told me this afternoon, after the field. She said—" He stopped. He looked like a man choosing his next words with the care you'd use with something that could break. "She said she had been patient for 3 years, and she understood that there were matters of the estate which required my full attention, and that she had believed those matters could be concluded, but that she now believed they were concluded in a way she had not anticipated." He paused. "She was very civilized about it. She has always been very civilized." "She's a good person," Briar said. "Because she was." That was the truth of it. Lady Celeste Whitmore was a good person, and she had been dealt a situation that wasn't her fault, and she'd handled it with more grace than Briar could have managed. "Yes," Rowan said. "She is." He was quiet for a moment. "She also said—" He stopped again, and something crossed his face that might have been surprise or might have been the remnant of surprise that had settled into something else. "She said the stable girl had better be worth it." The room was very quiet. "She said that?" Briar said. "Her exact words." He moved away from the window. He crossed the room, not fast, not like a man performing something, just like a man crossing a room toward a thing he'd made up his mind about. He stopped a few feet in front of her. This close, she could see that he was tired in the way that people are tired after a long tension finally breaks. Not exhausted, just hollowed out and a little lighter for it. "I'm going to tell you what I decided," he said. "I didn't decide it today. I decided it about 6 weeks ago, and I've been waiting because you asked me to wait, which was the right call, and the work needed finishing, and you were right about all of it." "Rowan, let me say it." He wasn't sharp about it. Just, let me say it. "I'm going to call the household together tomorrow morning. The staff, the steward, the advisors, whoever is in this house. And I'm going to tell them that the arrangement with Lady Whitmore is concluded, because Lady Whitmore and I both know it was a practical arrangement and not what either of us actually wanted. And I've let it go on too long because letting practical arrangements go on is easier than deciding what you actually want and then defending it." She could hear her own heartbeat. "And what do you actually want?" He looked at her. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not in the tack room. Not as... I want you here, at Ashford. I want you in the stable and in the library and at the table and in whatever future this estate has, which is not a certain future and is full of problems I haven't solved and debts I'm still paying down, and I'm not pretending otherwise." He stopped. He put one hand out, palm up, the same gesture she used with Tempest. Not grabbing, just offering. "I know what I'm asking. I know what it will cost you in the way that people talk. I know it's not a clean arrangement. I'm asking anyway." She looked at his open hand. She thought about the flour sack she'd arrived with, the 3 coins in her hem, the split boot, the sister who didn't write back. She thought about her mother's voice, both halves of it. Some people will love you for it, and some people will never forgive you for it. And she thought that both things could be true at the same time, and you had to pick which truth you were willing to live inside. She thought about the horse, standing in the dark for 2 years with his head up and every muscle braced, waiting for the hand that was going to hit him. And she thought about that same horse with his forehead pressed against a door at midnight because someone had finally just sat still. She put her hand in his, not all at once. She moved it the way she moved every deliberate thing, slowly, in full view, so nothing between them was a surprise. His hand closed around hers. His grip was careful, not tight, just present. "I need to say something first," she said. "All right. If you do this tomorrow, the household, the announcement, whatever it is, I need you to do it because it's what you want. Not because you've made yourself up to do a brave thing for its own sake. Not because you've decided that choosing me is a way of choosing against the life your father handed you. If it's any of those things and not just..." She stopped. "Not just me. If it's not just me, I'd rather you didn't." He was quiet long enough that she almost pulled her hand back. "It's you," he said. "I'm not going to dress it up. It's the way you walked into that stall. It's the way you told me I was bracing when nobody has ever told me anything that true in this library. It's the way the horse leans on you when he's tired. It's you." She breathed. "All right," she said. "All right? All right?" He looked down at their joined hands for a moment. Then he looked up at her. "It's going to be complicated," he said. "I'm warning you. I grew up complicated," she said. "I'll manage." She didn't sleep well. She lay in the tack room above the stable with the window gap and the cold coming through and Tempest breathing through the floor below her, and she thought about what morning would bring and whether she was being an idiot and whether courage and stupidity were actually the same thing arranged differently, and she went back and forth on it about 12 times. At some point she made a decision and stopped going back and forth. She didn't know exactly when. She just noticed that she'd stopped. She got up before dawn and went down and fed Tempest and stood with him in the dark the way she'd been standing with him for months. He was calm in the way he was always calm in the early mornings now, the way a recovered thing is calm. Not the absence of old damage, just the presence of enough trust to stand easy despite it. She told him what was going to happen. She wasn't sure why. He couldn't understand the words, but he listened with his ears forward and his head dropped, and that was enough. "Whatever happens today," she said, "you're all right. You know that, right? Whatever happens after any of this, you're all right. I've got you." Tempest pressed his nose into her hair. She stood there until the light came up. The household gathered in the manor hall at 9. Briar stood near the back, near the door. She had her clean shirt on, her best boots, the ones she'd resold in town 2 weeks ago. Halloran was beside her, which she hadn't asked for but was grateful for. Mrs. Pike was at the front with the other house staff, her face its usual neutral, giving away nothing. The steward stood near the fireplace with 2 advisors. There was no one else. Lady Celeste's carriage had left at 8, precisely on time, and the gravel had settled behind it. Rowan came in from the side door. He was in his usual dark coat, his usual straight back. He stood in front of the fireplace and he looked at the room, and the room went quiet. He didn't preamble. She'd known he wouldn't. He was not a man for preambles. "The arrangement with the Whitmore family," he said, "has been concluded. Lady Whitmore and I have agreed mutually and without ill will that the match does not serve either party as intended. The matter is closed." He paused. Let the room absorb that. The steward's face shifted slightly. One of the advisors opened his mouth and then closed it. "I will be discussing the estate finances separately with the steward's office. The Whitmore connection was never the only path to solvency, and I intend to demonstrate that." The room was still processing. He looked toward the back. He looked at her. "Briar Holloway," he said, "has been at Ashford Manor for 3 months. In that time she has done something that 12 experienced trainers over 2 years could not do. She has made this estate's most valuable and most difficult animal manageable, rideable, and this morning cleared a jump that this manor has not seen cleared in 7 years. He said it the way he said the thing about the roof and the grain stores and the tenant dispute, plainly, like a fact. She has also been honest with me in ways that have cost me some comfort and done me considerable good. I have asked her to stay at Ashford Manor, not in the position of stable hand, but as my equal." The room made a sound. It wasn't one sound. It was several sounds layered, some of them confused, some of them surprised. One of them from one of the advisors that was on its way to an objection before the man thought better of it. Mrs. Pike's face had changed. It had gone from neutral to something that might, if you were paying close attention, have been satisfaction. Rowan crossed the hall. He came through the gap between the staff and stopped in front of her. He looked at her the way he'd looked at her in the library, tired, certain, without armor. "I meant what I said," he said, quietly enough that it was for her. "All of it." The room was watching. Every face in it was watching. She was scared. She wanted to be honest about that. She was 24 years old with 3 coins in her hem and her heart going at twice its normal rate. And there was a part of her brain running the arithmetic of all the ways this could go badly, and she heard it. She just wasn't going to let it drive. She thought about the horse standing in the dark with every muscle braced. She thought about the first night she sat down on the floor and said, "Hey." She stepped toward him. His hand came up and she took it, and it was not graceful, and it was not the way it happens in stories. It was just 2 people standing in a cold hall with a room full of witnesses and something between them that had been building for 3 months and was now, for the first time, not being kept in a box. Halloran, behind her, made a sound that was definitely a laugh and then pretended it was a cough. Mrs. Pike looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at them. The steward was already making a note on something, because the steward was always making a note on something. And Rowan stood there with her hand in his own hall, in front of his own household, and he didn't look like a man running a regiment. He looked like a man who had put down something very heavy and was still figuring out what it felt like to stand upright without it. She held on. The talk started before the week was out. That was expected. Briar had expected it. Rowan had expected it. What neither of them had fully reckoned with was how loud it would get, or how fast, or the specific shape it would take when it arrived. Not just gossip between neighboring estates, which they'd prepared for, but a formal letter from the County Solicitors Association delivered to the steward's office on a Thursday morning, 8 days after the hall gathering, expressing concern about the Duke of Ashford's recent decisions and their potential bearing on outstanding financial obligations. The steward came to find Rowan with it. Rowan read it at his desk. He put it face down and didn't say anything for long enough that the steward started to sweat, and then he said, "Draft a response. Tell them the estate finances are an internal matter, and I'll be in correspondence with them directly within the fortnight." "Your Grace, the Whitmore connection is concluded," Rowan said. "I know what that means for the numbers. I've known since October. I've been working on it since October. Tell them that." The steward drafted the letter and didn't look convinced, and the letter went out. And 3 days after that, 2 of the county advisors who had been at the hall gathering sent their own letters of concern, one of them rather longer and more pointed than the other. Briar found out about the letters because the steward told Halloran, and Halloran told her, not to alarm her, he said, just so she understood the full shape of what she was inside. She understood the full shape. She'd understood it since the night in the stable when Rowan had told her it was complicated, and she had said she'd manage. Understanding a shape and living inside it were different things. The hardest part wasn't the letters. The hardest part was the Sunday morning 3 weeks after the hall gathering when she rode into the village with Halloran for the monthly supply run and felt the difference in the air. It wasn't dramatic. Nobody said anything. But the woman at the dry goods counter took a little longer to help her than before. And there was a group of 3 women outside the draper's shop who stopped talking when she walked by and started again when she was past. And she heard the word manor, and that was all she heard. And she went back to the cart and loaded the supplies and kept her face the way she'd learned to keep it. Halloran drove back without speaking for about a mile. "Say it," she said. "I wasn't going to say anything." "You've been not saying it loudly since we left the village." He shifted the reins to his other hand. "You knew it would be like this." "I knew. It's still not pleasant." "No," he said. "It's not." He was quiet for another stretch of road. "It doesn't last, though. Not the really vicious part of it. People find something else to talk about. It takes time." "How much time?" "Depends on what happens next. If things look stable, if you and the Duke look like you know what you're doing, people start revising their opinion. They're not going to be your friends overnight, but they'll stop talking." Briar watched the road. The bare December trees went past on both sides, their branches printed against a sky the color of old pewter. "My mother used to say that most people talk about other people's lives because they can't figure out their own," she said. "She wasn't always right, but she was right about that." "Wise woman." "She was." Briar tucked her hands under her arms for warmth. "I'm going to be all right. I just needed to say it out loud so it was real." Halloran gave her the same thing she'd said to him once. "Yeah, I know you know. I just wanted you to say it." She looked at him. He was watching the road, the gray at his temples, the missing piece of his ear, 18 years at Ashford written in the way he held himself in the cold. "Thank you," she said, "for the whole thing, all of it." He shrugged one shoulder. "You did the hard part. I just stood at the fence." "You stood at the fence every day," she said. "That counts." She told Rowan about the village that evening. She told him because not telling him would have been the easy thing, and she had established early, in the library, in the stable, in every conversation where she'd picked honesty over comfort, that the easy thing was not what she was doing here. He listened. He was at his desk, and she was in the chair, and it was their usual arrangement, except that neither of them had to pretend it was strictly professional anymore, which was a change so quiet she kept almost missing it. When she finished, he said, "I'll go into the village next week." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to be visible. If I stay inside this house while they talk about you, I'm letting them think I've done something I'm ashamed of. I haven't. I want that to be clear." She looked at him. "You know that's going to start a whole new round of, 'I know.' And you're going to go anyway." "Yes." She sat with that for a moment. It wasn't a comfortable feeling, being cared for that deliberately. She had not had a great deal of practice with it. "All right," she said, "but I'm coming with you." He looked up. "If you go alone, it looks like you're making a statement," she said. "If we both go, it looks like what it is. 2 people running an errand." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once, the decisive nod. "Thursday, then." Thursday. It was not the worst errand of her life. It was not comfortable. But they went, the 2 of them in the small open carriage, and they went into the dry goods shop together, and Rowan greeted the woman at the counter by name, which Briar had not expected, that he knew her name, that small fact of his that she was still learning. And he asked about the woman's husband's knee, which apparently had been troubling him, and the conversation was short and ordinary, and the woman's expression shifted about halfway through it into something that was not warmth, not yet, but was not hostility either. It was the expression of someone recalculating. The three women weren't outside the draper's shop this time. There was just the draper, an old man with good eyes, who looked at Briar when she came in and said, without particular fanfare, "Heard about the horse?" "Yes, sir," she said. "My son was at Ashford 6 years ago, training under Halloran," he said. "The horse threw him before he got close enough to touch him. I told my son not to take it personal. Just a bad animal," I said. "Seems I was wrong." "You weren't wrong to protect your son," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he went back to his fabric. "You need anything in particular today?" "Just thread," she said. "Black, if you have it." It wasn't much, a few minutes in a cold shop with an old man. But she thought about it on the drive back, about the way he'd said "seems I was wrong," without making it a big declaration, just a quiet revision, the way you adjust a figure in an account when you get new information. She thought that was probably how most things changed, not in grand moments, just in small revisions, repeated enough times to add up to something new. December settled into the estate and the work of it settled into her. There were real decisions to be made about Tempest's future, and she made them the only way she knew how, by thinking it through and saying what she thought and not dressing it up. She told Rowan in the library one evening that the horse needed more than just one rider who understood him. He needed other horses around him, a proper herd structure, because he'd been isolated too long and it was showing in small ways. The way he still went rigid at unexpected sounds from the yard, the way he always positioned himself facing the door. These were not moral failings in a horse. They were damage, and damage needed specific treatment. "More horses," Rowan said. 3 or 4 to start. Not for riding necessarily, just for company. There are rescues coming out of the eastern estates every winter. Horses people can't afford to keep when the money gets tight. We could take some of them in. He looked at her. "You want to start a rescue operation?" "I want Tempest to have horses he can be a horse with," she said. "If that also helps animals that would otherwise be put down, that seems like a tolerable side effect." He almost smiled. Tolerable. "I'll need space in the east paddock and another stable hand. Someone patient. I'll do the finding." "Of course you will." He pulled a fresh sheet of paper toward him. "Write me a plan. Numbers, costs, what you need from the estate." She blinked. "You're just saying yes." "I'm saying write me a plan. There's a difference." He dipped the pen. "Briar." "Yes." "It's a good idea. Stop being surprised when I agree with you." She picked up her own pen. She started writing the plan and didn't let him see that she was smiling. "Import." The solicitor's formal reply came in January, and it was, as these things went, as bad as expected and not quite as bad as feared. They outlined the estate's debt position, which Briar had known was real but had not known the full shape of until she saw it in numbers. And they advised strongly that the conclusion of the Whitmore arrangement was a material risk and that the Duke should consider his position carefully. Rowan read the letter twice. He put it in the right-hand drawer of his desk, which was where he put things he was done with. "What's in the left drawer?" she asked once. And he'd said things I'm not done with yet. And she'd said, "What's the difference?" And he'd said about 3 days of thinking on average, and she had thought, not for the first time, that she was still learning him, that there were rooms in him she hadn't been in yet. He called his own meeting with the solicitors. He went to the city for 3 days in late January, and she ran the stable and worked the horses and slept in the tack room, because the question of where she actually lived at Ashford Manor was still being navigated with the careful attention to proprieties that 2 people give to things that matter. He came back on a Wednesday evening and came straight to the stable in his travel coat before he'd even been inside the manor. "How did it go?" she said. "We have a workable path," he said. "It will take 4 years. It is not comfortable, but it doesn't require the Whitmore money." 4 years. Yes. Of tight numbers and careful management. Yes. She looked at him. He was tired, travel tired, but also the other kind, the kind of tired that comes from a long fight with difficult people. And there was mud on his boots from where the road had been bad in the valley, and he had not changed his coat or had his dinner or done any of the things a man of his position was supposed to do in a particular order. He had come to the stable first. She understood that. She understood it the way you understand something that doesn't need explaining, that just settles into you like warmth settling into cold hands. "Tight numbers is fine," she said. "I grew up on tight numbers." "I know you did. I'll run the stable accounts myself if you want. I'm better at adding than I look. I know that too." He leaned against the stall rail. He rubbed his face with both hands, the same gesture she'd seen him make once before, and she thought about all the gestures she'd collected over these months. The flat palm on the horse's neck, the neck rub when he was thinking, the way he held a pen, all the small private language of a person seen up close. "The solicitors asked about you," he said, "directly. They wanted to know what the arrangement was and what my long-term intentions were." "What did you tell them?" "I told them it was not their business. And then I told them anyway, because I didn't want it in a letter. I wanted to say it in a room so they couldn't misread it." He paused. "I told them you were my partner in this estate. Not a title, not a formal position, a partner. That you were running the stable and that I was building something at Ashford that was going to be worth more in 10 years than anything the Whitmore money could have bought, and that I needed them to work within that reality or find another client." She was quiet for a moment. "Did they find another client?" she said. "No," he said. "They have my grandmother's estate in 3 separate trusts. They're not going anywhere." She breathed. "You knew that?" "I suspected it. It was still a risk." He looked at her. "Everything is still a risk. I'm not going to pretend it isn't." "I know," she said. "I'm not asking for pretending. I'm just asking for the truth as you know it." "The truth as I know it," he said, "is that I am doing the best I know how to do. I am not my father, and I am not the Duke I was a year ago, and some days I don't know what I am exactly, but I know what I'm building." He paused. "And I know who I want next to me while I build it." She crossed the aisle and stood in front of him. She put her hand against the front of his travel coat, flat-palmed, the way she'd taught him. He put his hand over hers. They stood in the stable in the cold with Tempest breathing behind her, and the lamplight on the straw and the sound of the other horses settling for the night. And she thought that this unglamorous, imperfect, complicated, honest thing was the best thing she had. Maybe the best thing she'd ever had. "Go inside," she said. "Have your dinner. You're cold and tired, and the steward is going to want to see you before morning." "I know." "I'll be in for the library meeting later." He looked at her. "It's a Wednesday." "I know. I have things to tell you about the new horses. I got word on 2 rescues out of the Hartley estate last week, and one of them is going to need a vet before he comes to us." 2 horses. "To start." He looked at her hand on his coat. He looked at her. "All right," he said. "Wednesday in the library." He went inside, and she went back to the horses, and the evening closed down around Ashford Manor the way evenings do. Ordinary and necessary, and full of small tasks that added up to the substance of a life. Spring came in the way it comes to that part of the country. Not gently, not all at once, but in fits and arguments, a warm week followed by a cold snap, mud, and then sun, and then mud again. By March, the East Paddock held 4 horses besides Tempest, 2 thin-sided rescues from the Hartley dissolution, a young bay with a bowed tendon that had healed wrong and would need a full season of careful work, and an old gray mare with a quiet nature that Briar had identified on instinct as the one who would steady the herd. She'd been right. Within 2 weeks, the old mare had established herself as the herd anchor, and Tempest had begun doing something she had hoped for but hadn't been sure she'd see. He'd started seeking company. Not forced proximity, not the nervous clustering of frightened animals, but the deliberate choice to stand near other horses. To sleep in the same corner of the paddock. To run when they ran, not because something spooked him, but because they ran. Halloran watched this from the fence one morning and said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "You know what that is." "Trust," she said. "Took long enough. It took exactly as long as it needed to." He looked sideways at her. "You apply that logic to people too." "Sometimes," she said. "When they deserve it." He made a sound that was fully a laugh this time and didn't pretend otherwise. Tits. The gossip did not die in a single moment. It petered out, the way Halloran had said it would, in small revisions. The draper's old eyes stopping to watch with something close to respect when she rode Tempest through the village in late February. The woman at the dry goods counter saying her husband's knee was better, and mentioning, almost in passing, that her youngest boy was thinking about working with horses, and did Miss Holloway know of any opportunities? The county solicitors sending their quarterly correspondence addressed jointly, not just to the Duke. These were not forgiveness. She wasn't looking for forgiveness. She hadn't done anything wrong. They were recalculations, and she took them for what they were. Evidence that the world moved, when given enough time and consistency to move in. Lady Celeste sent a letter in March. It was addressed to the Duke, as she supposed all Lady Celeste's letters always would be, but there was a postscript, brief, businesslike, as everything Lady Celeste did was brief and businesslike, that said she had heard the rescue operation at Ashford was doing well, and that she had a connection to a large estate in the north that was dissolving and might have suitable animals. A name and address were included. Briar read it over Rowan's shoulder and felt something that was not quite gratitude and not quite guilt, but was something in between. A recognition that some people's grace goes deeper than you originally give them credit for, and that losing a thing you wanted doesn't always make you small. Write to her, Briar said. I was going to. Tell her we'd appreciate the connection. Tell her... She stopped. Tell her the horse is well. Rowan looked at her. She asked about him that first day, Briar said. She said she'd heard what happened to him, and that Rowan had been devastated. She deserves to know it came right. He wrote the letter that evening. He showed it to her before he sent it, which he didn't have to do. She read it and said it was good, and he folded it and posted it, and they didn't talk about Lady Celeste again, not because there was anything unresolved, but because there wasn't. The morning they rode the wall together came in April. Not planned exactly. Briar had been working Tempest in the East Field for 30 minutes, just the two of them, the way she still did most mornings because some things don't change once you find them. And Rowan had come out with the gray hunter, and they'd ridden side by side for a while in the way two people ride when they've been doing it together long enough that it's no longer an event, just a thing that happens. They came around to the north corner of the field. The wall was there, the stone reset after the winter frost had shifted it, sitting in the new grass with the morning light on it. Briar slowed Tempest. Rowan slowed the gray. They both looked at the wall. You want to, he said. You want to, she said. Yes. Me too. They came at it together, not raced, not performed, just two horses moving at pace side by side in the early April light. Tempest was different from what he'd been in December. He was carrying more weight and more muscle, and 4 months of healing beside other horses had done something to the way he moved, something in the spine and the shoulder that had loosened, the way a person's posture loosens when they stop waiting for an argument. He didn't shorten at the wall. He gathered 3 long, clean strides, and the push from his haunches and then the air, both horses in it at the same time, and the gray cleared it neat and Tempest's back hoof nicked the stone again. The same hoof as in December, which made Briar laugh, one sharp, involuntary laugh, because of course it did. They landed and pulled up, and she was still laughing, and Rowan was looking at her with the expression she'd been cataloging all year. The one that wasn't quite a smile, but was in the neighborhood. The one that came and went too fast if you weren't watching for it. He clipped it again, he said. I know. You think he'll always clip it. Probably, she said. He's got a habit of it. It doesn't matter, he still goes over. Rowan looked at the wall behind them, at the displaced stone same as before, sitting in the new grass. My father built that wall, he said. He said it was the measure of a horseman. He said if you couldn't clear it, you hadn't earned the field. He paused. He never cleared it himself, not once that I saw. He just put it there for other people to fail at. Briar looked at him. I used to think he was right about it, Rowan said, that it was a measure of something real. I spent years... He stopped. I spent years trying to earn things by that standard. Things that didn't go the way they should have because I was measuring them wrong. What do you measure them by now? She said. He looked at her. The morning light was on the east side of his face, and she could see all of it. The tiredness that didn't fully go away, the careful mouth, the steadiness that was real and not just performed now, or less performed, which was as much as you could ask of anyone. By whether the thing is honest, he said. By whether the people in it are trying. He paused. By whether the horse goes over, even if he clips the stone. She looked at the displaced stone in the new grass. That's a better measure, she said. I think so. They rode back across the field together, and the horses walked close enough that their riders' knees almost touched in the thin April sunlight. And Ashford Manor sat ahead of them with its old stone and its impractical windows, and its 4 months of change and its 4 years of careful, tight, numbered, unglamorous rebuilding still ahead of it, and Briar thought about what it meant to arrive somewhere. Not the arriving itself. Not the moment you walk through the gate or sign the paper or take the hand in the cold hall. The arriving that comes after. The morning you wake up and the place is just where you live and the people in it are just your people and the work is just your work and you've stopped waiting for it to be taken from you. She wasn't sure exactly when that had happened. Somewhere between December and April. Somewhere between the flour sack she'd arrived with and the boots she'd had, resold twice now because she was staying, and staying was worth good boots. She thought about the girl she'd been at the gate in the rain with all her things in a flour sack. She didn't pity her. That girl had made the right calls, had sat down on the stable floor in the dark, had told the truth in the library, had stepped forward in the hall. None of those choices had been clean. All of them had cost something. But cost wasn't the same as wrong. You could pay a price for a true thing and not regret the pain. That was something her mother had not said, but would have said if she'd had more time. Briar said it to herself instead, on a clear April morning in the east field of Ashford Manor, with a black horse under her that had learned to go over the wall he'd been afraid of, and a man riding beside her who had learned to put down the measuring stick he'd been given by someone who'd never measured anything fairly in his life. She said it to herself, and she meant it, and she kept riding. Butchin. The rescue horses from the north arrived in May. 6 of them, thin and winter rough, their eyes showing too much white when the gate swung open. The connection Lady Celeste had provided had been good. The estate manager had kept records, knew which animals had been handled badly and which had just been underfed. And Briar spent the first afternoon reading the records and then going down the row of stalls the way she'd gone down Ashford's row on her first day, learning names, reading postures, filing things away. Halloran walked the row with her. You're going to want 2 more stable hands, he said. Already found them. Miller's daughter from the village, she's good with the young ones, patient. And there's a boy from the Hartley estate who was out of work when it dissolved. 19 years old, good hands, Halloran. I watched him with the bay for 20 minutes last week, and he never once used force when the horse was nervous. Just waited. Halloran looked at her. I know, she said. He reminded me of something. Yourself. Maybe, she said. Maybe someone who just knows how to be quiet around frightened things and was never told that was worth anything. You're going to tell him it is. I'm going to give him a job, she said. That's the same thing. She stopped at the last stall. The animal in it was the worst of the 6. A gray mare, maybe 10 years old, bite scars on her flanks, one ear with an old tear in it from something she hadn't been given the chance to run from. She was standing at the back of the stall the way Tempest had stood on Briar's first day, not facing the door, just occupying the farthest corner, making herself small. Briar sat down on the floor of the aisle outside the stall. Halloran looked at her. Again, she said. You know the Duke's going to walk past in about an hour and find you sitting on the floor. He's used to it by now. Halloran rubbed the back of his neck. You want me to... No, she said. Go run your stable. I'll be here a while. He walked off up the aisle, shaking his head in a way that had stopped meaning disapproval and started meaning something else a long time ago. Briar sat on the packed earth floor with her back against the timber post and her knees up and the cold of the stone coming through her skirt, and she looked at the gray mare standing in the back of the stall with her scarred flanks and her torn ear and her whole body set for a blow that wasn't coming. Hey, she said. The mare's ears moved. I know you've had a bad run. I know somebody hurt you, and then a bunch of other people tried to fix it wrong, and now you don't know what a safe hand is supposed to feel like. She paused. I know. I know it feels like the smart thing to stay back there where they can't reach you, but I'm just going to sit here for a while. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit. The mare stood in her corner. Briar sat on the floor. At the other end of the stable block, Tempest moved in his stall. The slow shift of his weight, the small sounds of a horse at rest. 4 months of other horses around him. Enough trust built, brick by brick, to sleep on his side now sometimes. Not fixed, not unwounded, but easeful. That was the word. Easeful. Which was not the same as healed, but was what healing looked like from the inside, most of the time. She'd been at Ashford Manor 8 months. She had come with a flour sack and 3 coins and a broken boot and a way of being quiet that most people didn't understand the value of. She had not arrived knowing how any of this would turn out. She had not had a plan for herself, only a plan for the horse, and even that plan had been no more complicated than this. Sit with him. Be honest with him. Let him set the pace. It turned out that was most of what any of it required, if you were willing to do it long enough and meant it when you did. The gray mare at the back of the stall turned her head slightly toward the door. Not much, just a degree or two. Her ear, the one without the tear in it, tipped forward. "There you go," Briar said quietly. "There you go." She didn't move. She didn't push. She sat with her back against the post in the cold May morning, and she waited. Because some things cannot be rushed. Because the only clock that matters with a frightened thing is the one it carries inside itself. And because she had learned, in 8 months and a whole lifetime before that the greatest thing you could offer anything that had been hurt was exactly this: your steady, unhurried, unglamorous presence. Not rescue, not mastery, just this. Just, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Take your time." The mare took 1 step toward the door. Briar sat still and let her.